It's okay. We'll see YouTube locking up.
1 p.m.
This,
April 21st, 2019. Chapter 1, April 9th, 1950. Diana's Journal. I would like to think of today as an interesting day. What should have been an uneventful day for me had turned out to be horrible. As I am sitting down to record this entry, my anxieties are high. It has only been a week since I had defeated the Titan Darkseid on the planet Apocalypse. In another universe, with the help of Roxy, the symbiote entity that joined with me to help defeat Darkseid, we freed all the Titans of that universe from their orbs that had imprisoned them for eons. After doing so, we used the Celestial Gate to transport back to my home on Earth. This next part is difficult for me to explain but necessary for this record. There are many parts to the narrative and must be told in a serial way. If required, I will make edits as my understanding of the...
Alright, here we go. We're going to get started. Everything looks like it's working. Good. It's 6 minutes after 3 o'clock p.m. Eastern Daylight Savings Time. Today is the 14th of June, 2019. Streaming live out of Tampa, Florida, here on the East Coast of the United States, for those of you not from here. Or if you're watching this on YouTube, repeat or rebroadcast. This is the day we recorded. Was the 14th of June. It's a Friday. For us, Friday is really the beginning of our week. Our work schedule is normally a streaming schedule. Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday we stream 2 shows. We do the afternoon writers workshop from 2 o'clock in the afternoon until 5. We do an hour intermission from 5 to 6, and then from 6 o'clock to 10 o'clock we stream the grind, which is the video game, online game portion of our site. Everybody's been having internet issues. Verizon, they were doing some type of maintenance 3 nights ago, I think, Tuesday, Wednesday night. PS4 was having all kinds of issues yesterday. And it wasn't just me. So a bunch of other people are having issues. And bringing up our feed here so I can see it. I don't see anybody else up there. It's doing DC Universe right now, so I'm going to go ahead and bring up our feed so I can see the chat. Anyway, let's go ahead and renew this. Turn that up. Okay, here we go. Make this bigger. Last we left off, according to my notebook here, handy dandy notebook. I still use paper and pencil notebooks when I write and stuff. I find them to be better than the electronic version. Electronic versions have their advantages, but I like these kind of notebooks more because they don't require electricity. And I'm really giving a lot of thought to going back and using my paper organizer because I feel a lot more organized when I use I used to have a paper, like you open it up and it had all your calendar right there, where it's on one sheet of paper, and then you just could write stuff and it was always visible. I don't like the computer one, although it has its advantage because you always got to come back to the computer to use it. And even if you put it on a tablet, it's not big enough. It's always tiny. And, or you can't see the entire thing in a meaningful way. At least for me, it's not useful. And then, yeah, I don't like it. I like the paper one a little more. I just do. In this, we stopped at 2 hours and 11 minutes into our character. Let's go ahead and bring that up. Still reviewing book 2 here. This is our YouTube page. This is where it's kept. Yeah, bring this up. If you're interested, I'll put a link up here. I put a fancy little doodad on there. That's what I'm going to call it. I can type just fan fiction now in the chat here. Assuming I spell it correctly. And it brings up the thing. Yeah. Now I have the chat thing turned off, so I should turn that on. Turn it back on. Good thing I checked. Speech chat. We're going to be reviewing book 2 today, and we're getting into the part where Etta and Silas Wayne make out, and Pauletta and Patrick Wayne make out. So some of that will have to be muted out because we're on Twitch. So some of that might not be Twitch TOS policy. But if you want to hear it its entirety, unfiltered, you can go see it on YouTube. There we go. Did it start up? Oh, it didn't take us out, so let's see. Let's give it a test. Okay. The Discord one. Put a Discord one in there too. Discord. That.
Nightbot.
Here it goes.
Said like to know what is happening at Chronicles of Earth 9. Consider joining our Discord channel at https://discord.gg/6qsay.
GG. Anyway, so there's the book 2. It's up in its video book form. I like to think of it more as a pre-visualization, because this is sort of the format you would put it prior to making the actual 3D parts of it. We can't make the 3D parts to it right now because I have to buy a new iClone bench. Mine, the one I have is on the hard drive that's sitting down, but that computer burned up. So I can't get the information off the hard drive. Anyway, so let's go on. So let's see, Road to Redemption, which is right here.
"50 years ago, back then, I had traveled the country on horseback. I helped your ancestor to deal with organized crime all those."
Now we're up to the part with Patrick Wayne and Paul. They're getting together, and we for the still photo as part of the story, we got Adam West in there and Linda Carter there, two big actors that were part of the genre, and so I thought it'd be kind of cool. And you can see our photos are slowly moving where they're side by side. Our artistic expression. So let's go ahead and make this bigger so you can see it. Let's get going, and then we'll hit the space bar overview.
Those years ago, I recall that he was a judge. Yes, he was mainly a lawyer by trade and a businessman by heritage. He lived a long time. You look just like him, very tall and handsome. After his wife, Amelia, died, he spent his widow years socializing as a playboy. He refurnished these rooms to help young women who had fallen into a life of prostitution and drugs. Back then, opium and heroin were the new fads of their day in the United States, whereas in Europe, cocaine was the wonder drug. I had helped Solomon to rescue these women who life had doomed them to a mindless state. He was a wonderful man. His son, Alan, took up medicine to help his father. After I had helped Solomon with his case with Joshua Wayne, I had returned to Paradise Island until Major Trevor crashed his plane on the island. Why would a lawman build a set of bondage rooms? Patrick asked. Humans have their vices, young Patrick. Your ancestor knew that. He took advantage of their lust and used that to lure people to the manor to study them and to collect information. Though he did not actively arrest people, he came to learn and to understand who were the real villains and who were the innocent victims. Wouldn't that be...
Now, there is an interesting part because he's asking about bondage rooms, and she's explaining in terms of vices. Concept of vices and virtues comes from the Greeks, and I thought it would be interesting because the women in this period, especially Hippolyta, come from that time period. Hippolyta actually lived through that time period. She lived prior to the Trojan War. She died during the Attic War, which was the war between Athens and the Amazons, Scythia. The land they're from is from the land, what's called Scythia, and they're part of Themyscira, which is a section of that larger country, nation, and which is on the steppes of Asia. As you move off the European plateau onto the Asian continent, that part of Asia was the former nation that they're historically a part of. Now, in modern times, that nation doesn't exist anymore. It's now modern Russia, Georgia, and what's the other country? Turkey. It's all a part of that region. And but in the immortal realm, those nations still exist. And she's the queen of that, one of the queens. She's not the only queen. Themyscira, there are many queens, because in the immortal realm, they're all still alive. She lives on through into the immortal realm because she died a hero. And in the Greek mythology, the heroes went on. Only heroes could go on to the Elysian field. Everybody else ended up in Tartarus. And Tartarus, beyond misconception, although it's depicted as hell, it's not really hell. It's a place that spirits go after the body passes on, immortal life passes on, and they cycle back through. And so at some point, people can die a hero in her lifetime, and so she died a hero in her lifetime, and so she became an immortal, and she worked for Athena. And now that all really pertains to the Greek mythos. The way that we're trying to explain how our cosmology works so that it's unilateral or works with all these different religions is the same way we're explaining how multi-universes work, and the concept of what the god of all gods would be versus the Titans. In our universe, to bring balance to the universe, you have what are called Titans. And they're life forms that live outside of time, and that's why they're timeless. And but there are different levels of Titans. Like within the angels, there are different levels of angels, and so they do different things. They have different functions. And Hippolyta, she's not necessarily an archangel, but she's one of the angels, and she's still the queen of Themyscira. And so she's sort of, in this time period, she's sort of building a gap between the mortal realm and the immortal. The time is cycling back around where mortals are becoming aware of immortals. Though on a small scale, there are people that are aware that immortals exist, but as a larger scale of civilization, people don't believe that immortals exist. in the mortal realm. And most people think of them as metahumans, and they're not metahumans. They're actually a different organism altogether, but they can easily pass as metahumans. And in this time period, metahumans are kind of half and half. Some people like them, some people don't like them. And so it depends on where you live and who you run into. That will determine the relationship between, but we're dealing with the 1940s. Everyone's dealing with the war, so not a lot of people are really thinking about it at this time. And this is how we get our two people together. And what I was saying about vices is I think it's interesting how someone who actually has lived through that time period explain what vices and virtues are in terms of metaphors and ethos. And to a 1940 adult versus someone who lived basically she lived in what, the 15th century BCE.
Considered entrapment, he asked. Sometimes, subterfuge may be necessary to help people combat villainy. Judge Solomon sought to use his power of wealth to help others. He saved a lot of people in his time. The rooms here were the coping methods he used to escape from the ones he couldn't save. I see that your parents restored the bunker to their pleasure play rooms. Yes. Well, I guess. We continued our tour of the room. He showed me the master bedroom, which had a bondage bed that was built into a wooden rack. There was a cage and some other equipment. The room off to the right of the main room had a table and several store.
Now here, let's keep in mind Hapala has been to these rooms before. She was there when they were built. But she hasn't seen them since they've been refurbished. But the basic idea is the same. They're just basic playrooms that, prior to television and modern movies, a lot of wealthy people used to invite people down in their house, and they'd have these big parties, and people would basically have sex. Because that's what adults did back then. They had these big dances, and people would get together, and that's why homes had like a lot of rooms in them. And because back in the old days, people would travel by horseback, and horses could only travel a certain distance before they had to rest again. And although there were public houses and public hotels, most people stayed with other people. And what they would do is people would invite people to their homes, and they just stay there. And so a lot of wealthy people, that's what they did. They would just invite people to come stay at the manor. And so you always had people coming out. And one of the things that they had at the Wayne Manor was these playrooms that people could go have fun with, frolicking as adults. And so in modern times, these type of behavior hasn't really fallen out of favor. It's just, depending on what's part of society you live in, you don't really see it all that much anymore, but they're slowly making a comeback in the modern time period as people with everyday homes, they starting to build these now in their homes now, so it's not unheard of. And so in 2019 it's making a comeback, but hundreds of years ago these places existed, and they go back even further than that. But what we're trying to explore here with these two characters is that we're trying to show that the queen is kind of she's up to date with the things, and she's very comfortable having sex with men. And she's not like I want to say she's not a prude. She does prudent things, but she's not a prude. And so we're seeing in this video that Hapala is really into it, and Patrick is kind of being sensitive, but then he slowly realizes that she's not like she's not a very sensitive person. And so sensitive is a word choice I use because I I don't have another word to describe it, but he starts to realize he can have his little fantasy here, and he starts to really get into it.
Storage cabinets. I looked into the cabinets and saw whips, straps, rope, and binds. Another cabinet had a variety of costumes in male and female sizes. The room across from that or the left door in the hall was the bathroom. It had a bathtub that was built to fit 2 people and had some bondage hooks built into the walls. The main room or living room had the kitchen area with bar. There were some equipment in this room that were all built from wood. Even the coffee table was designed for the convenience of bondage. They thought of everything here, I said jokingly. Where would you like to start, Hippolyta? Well, young Patrick, my telepathy has revealed to me that you...
So now here we have the 2 photos side by side, and I'm trying to use that as a technique to wherever we have these encounters, whether it be a combat scene or a sex scene or a one-on-one engagement with 2 characters, you sort of narrow it down to 2 people. And so, and it's pretty much the dialogue is always between the 2 people. And I think for us as a story, as a book and serial, that's what it all comes down to. We build these climactic moments with our characters, and then we get to it. And so Patrick has this sort of dream, and this is a play on the idea of the maiden. It's sort of a fantasy they say all men have, is the fantasy of the maiden, and sailors dream of it. And so it's like an old romantic tale. And so Patrick kind of wants to live out this fantasy he has, and he's read about Athenata, Diana, and he's sort of has this dream. And so Paula can read his mind, and she kind of is into it, and she knows a lot of guys have these dreams, so she's kind of wants to do it. You know, she loves foreplay, and so she's like, all right, let's go to it. And I kind of gives us an excuse to use that photograph, which is actually really cool.
You desire the warrior maiden. In your dreams you have fantasized about my daughter. Oh, do not feel shame. All men dream of the maiden. I guess we should start there. I will change my outfit to my warrior armor since that is your fantasy. Okay, I will change too. You use the bathroom, and I will use the master bedroom. The closet in the bedroom has some Greek costumes, he said, and with that, I went to the master bathroom to change. It had a large closet with some hangers. I removed my dress and other garments and hung them on some hangers in the closet. I positioned my body so I was free of any breakable objects. Then, I spun in a pirouette. As I focused on my Amazon armor, the outfit formed on my body. I checked myself over in the mirror and straightened out my belt and tiara. I walked out of the bathroom and knocked on the bedroom door, which was closed.
Now, that's sort of a play on the old TV show. That's what Linda Carter used to do when she did her little pirouette. And so we had that in. We've actually, it's the second time we used it in the drama. We wanted to have a nice shout out to the show, and it's actually the actress that came up with that idea for when they did it in the TV show. Originally, they wanted to do it with all these different camera angles, and they said that it was to sort of give this sort of striptease look for the men watching the show. And then, but it took so long to do, they couldn't do it every single show because it would waste a lot of time. And so they basically came to like a light pow. And then as the show progressed, and then so we gave a little shout out to that. But the idea of this scene is to sort of be a parody of a parody. If you read a lot of superhero fan fiction, what normally happens is our heroine, in some form, they're taken by the villain, and then they're put through all these little sex tortures, stripped in these peril situations, tied up and stuff, and these guys live out their fantasy. And I thought it would be funny what if the people in the story were just playing, and it would make for a pretty cool scene. And then and it would be kind of a laughable. That's sort of the, it would be lighthearted. So here you have these 2 characters. They're both very secure in their sexuality, and they're very secure in what they want. They're both adults, and they're gonna just kind of have fun with the scene.
Am ready. Patrick, come on.
Oh, I should note that once the real sort of sexual material starts, we'll have to mute that out. So I'll be able to hear it. I'm just going to let it play through. It'll be on there. But if you want to hear it, you can go listen to it on our YouTube site. But I don't know if it's against Twitch TOS policy, but I'm going to assume it is. And just to be safe, we'll mute that out. And then sort of meet them halfway on it.
I opened the door and stepped into the room. Patrick was not finished getting into his outfit. It was a facsimile of the Greek armor from the invasion of Troy, although it was missing some details. It was made of a form of light plastic that was painted to resemble metal or bronze. I helped him to fasten it up. I smacked his firm buttocks. Patrick said, "Okay, I am going to play the evil villain who has lured you to my lair to ambush you. I will gas you to knock you out and suspend you upside down by the ankles to interrogate you for information. Do you have any problems with being suspended upside down, Hippolyta?" "No, I do not." "Well, that would..."
So here he's like, he's explaining what he's going to do, and that's sort of what people who do like real foreplay do. It's not meant to hurt the other person, and most people, they sort of discuss what they're, and this is what, because we did the Etta Silas scene before, and he didn't really know what to do, and so in their little thing, he was a virgin, he didn't really know how to ask, and so he just kind of went right into it, and he realized after she asked him, well, if I'm all tied up and my arms are tied to this chair, how are you going to get my clothes off? And then he was like, that's a good question. So here are the adults, the experienced people, and they're sitting down and they're talking about it. Well, what are we going to do? How are we going to do this? And he's kind of explaining what he'd like to do. And then she's like, okay. Because that's kind of how a guy would ask. He would be like, okay, I'm going to play the evil villain and lure you to my lair and ambush you. I'll gas you. He's got a little smoke bomb thing. And knock you out and suspend you upside down by the ankles to interrogate you. I mean, he's got a little pulley thing that you can suspend her, little hook thing, and a couple of varieties of hooks. And he's like, do you have a problem being suspended upside down? I'm trying to think of that Adam West voice. She's like, no problem whatsoever. I'm okay with that. But then she's kind of concerned with that. Well, it's a wooden structure, and she's a lot denser than this is sort of getting into the immortal. The Titans they look like humans, but they're denser, they're stronger, and they weigh a lot more. And so she's, that thing gonna hold my mass? And then he sort of explains the tolerances of the thing, and then she said, okay, seems cool. And so he's kind of explaining it, and so this is sort of what real people would do, and they sort of make sure no one's going to get hurt, and she wouldn't get hurt, and then she's more concerned with him. And then so that's sort of what's going on here, and then they get into it.
Wooden structure hold my weight. My muscle mass is denser than a mortal woman. It is designed to hold about 3,500 pounds and has a chain hoist that can be operated manually. That should be adequate, I said. Remember, in the fantasy, you derive your superpowers from your outfit and your sexual energy. So, in the play, I use that to capture you, Hippolyta. I think I understand the plot. I got into the position outside the room to start the fantasy. He took up his position acting like he was busy working on something important. I stormed into the room. Aha, evil Patrick! I have caught you with your guard down. Boo-ha-ha, warrior maiden. It is you who have been caught.
And so here they get into the foreplay part, and I thought it would be funny because they know they're play acting, so they're kind of doing he's like, boo ha ha, and she's like, aha, you evil Patrick dude, and they're sort of cheesy dialogue, but it's funny. And they're kind of getting into it, and then he does a little smoke bomb on the ground. Now, the floor is concrete, so he's not going to burn the place down. It's because the place is designed to do that. And she kind of Remember, he explained what the plot was, so she's going along with it.
He dropped a smoke bomb on the floor to simulate the sleeping gas. I coughed in character. Oh no, not a sleeping potion. Yes, warrior maiden. I, Sir Patrick, have rendered you helpless with my magic potion. You'll never get away with this villainy. I coughed again and collapsed to the floor. I continued to resist the gas for 5 minutes or so to increase the dramatic effect of the scene. I rolled my eyes back and simulated being knocked out. Patrick touched my neck to check my pulse. Now, you are in my power, wench. He rubbed his hands along my breast and ran his hands down onto my sexual organ. Your arm...
Okay, we're gonna have to mute it out at this point, and then, what? We'll unmute it, he'll be being able to talk, you won't be able to hear the audio as we go through this. One thing that I have learned with OBS Studio, if I have it enabled and I hit the spacebar will enable and disable the audio. I didn't know I did that. So, but when I have it on YouTube here, spacebar starts and stops the film. She gives him a boot to the forehead. Whack. And she does this backflip. And he's like, wow. But what happens is he does his dialogue. Oh, your chastity denies my triumph, fair maiden. Her armor, her clothes, basically wearing clothes. And then it's like, I shall remove it. And then she's like, aha. And then she lifts her leg up and she does his fake like kick to his forehead, which is his huge leg stretch. And he's like, oh my god. And he's like, yeah, because he's like, you see a woman do a leg extension like that, it's pretty awesome for most guys. Wow, you're limber. And he does his fake like he got kicked in the head. And so now they're rolling around on the ground. He's like, wow, you're amazing. He's starting to realize just how limber she is. It's like, wow, you're amazing. She's like, practice, practice, practice. Sometimes I think the play stuff is sometimes better than the real stuff. Because with the play sort of sexual stuff, you can go a little bit more exuberant with the writing. You don't have to be as serious, so they can say stuff that probably wouldn't be said. You know, the more violent stuff. So we can unmute it. Past the safe parts. Safe space. Yeah. There we go.
Made our way over to the bathroom where we both showered our bodies clean. We spent the rest of the night sleeping together in the bed. You know, young Patrick, you never did hang me upside down. Yes, I kind of forgot in the moment. The way your beautiful body looked in the moment made me forget about that. Well, we can always do it later. Yes, you know, Hippolyta, I do have a nice anal hook. Really, it has been some time since I had used one. I said, you Amazons are quite the hedonists. My pleasure. Diana's Journal 5 Tuesday morning. December 14th, 1943 morning came swiftly for me. I awoke with Steve cuddled up onto me with Walter and Paris laying on top of my bosom. Apparently, the two cats found my chest to be a nice self-heating pillow.
Here's a funny scene. Diana wakes up in the morning. I wanted to write something more elaborate, and then I talked myself out of doing it. She's laying, she wakes up and Steve's like laying over her and he's naked. And the two cats are laying on top of her and they're cats, so they're naked. And so everyone's laying on top of her. And she's like, well, this is a weird moment in my life. So she's trying to get up to not wake anybody. And so she has to use her superpowers to move swiftly.
Using my telepathy, I quieted that cats down. The two had come to me because Etta and Hippolyta had spent the night away from their rooms. The cats, having been in this new environment, had not habituated to the manner. I did my best to maneuver my body so that I did not disturb anyone's rest. I used my super speed to work my way over to the shower. I took a quick shower to wash my body and hair out with the hot water. The shower served to wake my body up and wipe the sleep from my mind. I changed into my jogging outfit and worked my way out to the driveway to stretch my body early and to do some exercises. Elizabeth joined me a short time later. She was in good.
Now here's the first time Elizabeth is joining them, and Elizabeth hasn't really exercised in a long time, but they're not going to go out there and like run her into the ground. They're going to go out there and try to help her. And one thing that you're always seeing the Amazons doing, and this is they work out all the time. And and this is encouraging to the other women in the story. And you always see the women in the thing working out, jogging. We're going to do more natural type exercises. Although I do go to the gym. So I think it's good. And Elizabeth sort of picks up on this, and this is the first time she's joining the ladies in the morning.
Good spirits for the morning exercises. Hippolyta and Etta came walking out of the manor. Good morning, everyone, I said. Good morning.
I like that picture, Linda. That's from the movie Me and My Bobby McGee. That's before she did Wonder Woman. I think it's funny. She's got that little cigarette in her hand. And I like that photo. I kind of see Hippolyta like that. Not necessarily smoking the cigarette, but she's all like playful. So yeah. And then there's a good shot of Etta. That's from when she was filming. Was after she did. I think that's when they were filming Tarzan the Ape Man. It's from where those shots are from, I believe. I don't know what. I think she was older than 20, but she was in the 23, 24 range. She did Tarzan the Ape Man, which was pretty good. I think out of all the movies that I've seen her in, I like Bolero the most. I think that was probably her best movie she made. She made another movie after Bolero where she was the husband died and she became a widower, and she went off to on a vacation basically, and I thought that was pretty. She was an older woman. She was in her 30s, I guess, at the time, and it was a really good movie. I saw it in the theater, and all her movies tend to be sort of light-hearted dramas. They're not serious dramas in that there's like blood and action, but they're more of the day in the life of this person type story. And I think the best movie she made was Bolero, because there were a lot of really good actors in there. They were in Italy and they were making wine, and she learning how to bullfight, and the guy she was with was a bullfighter, and kind of like a rodeo movie, I guess, in Spain, right? Spain. And he gets injured and she helps nurse him back to normal, recover in the movie. And she also learns how to bullfight in the movie. And in that country, bullfighting is like it's like the thing. It's like everything, like this honor and stuff. And it's kind of a cool movie. And but anyway, so here are all our ladies. They're out and talking about their fun that they had. And we're slowly seeing a story that Etta and Hippolyta are kind of becoming really good friends. Etta is the Aries, Hippolyta is the Leo, and Diana is the Libra. Remember, Libra, complementary sign is Leo. Libra always needs a Leo in their life to kind of complete them. And that's sort of Hippolyta's function for Diana. And then they're talking with Elizabeth here in the story.
Diana, Elizabeth said. Good morning, Diana. Etta and Hippolyta said. You two are in good spirits this morning. I gather that your evening was enjoyable. I said. Oh, it was enjoyable, Etta said. As Hippolyta and Etta stretched together, they began to tell us their story. I should add that even though we three had telepathy and could read each other's mind, we still liked to converse in spoken words. As Lichtenberg stated, man is a gregarious animal, and much more so in his mind than in his body. A golden rule: judge men not by their opinions but by what their opinions have made of them. As applied.
Now, Here's sort of our philosophical moment. Lichtenberg. Here he's describing the gregarious nature of man. And what that means is people, even though human beings are mammals and they live in what's called a familiar environment, family, and they like to converse and talk and have dialogue. I think that's why people like watching sex. And I think that goes back to a time where they used to live in together as families, and people probably were making out right there in the open. And what else would they do? Go off and find a tree somewhere. But and this hasn't changed in comparing the immortals and mortals and metahumans in the story. They like to talk and converse and express themselves, and this doesn't change, and it's what they're really talking about. And applied to the women, they just like to engage in conversation and study a lot of psychology, feminine psychology at that, female psychology. Women like to converse and talk and get together in these groups and to some extent do it, but not as much as I think women do. And so here we're getting to see that in the story. All these mature women. Elizabeth is the only one that didn't get to be with anybody. Kind of feeling left out.
Lied to us women. A gregarious animal we were. The joy of conversation was always a welcome. I could feel the living spirit in Etta and in Hippolyta as they recalled their sexual intercourses with Silas and Patrick. Etta described her experience first as we started our jog. Well, it was interesting. I am not sure what way to describe the experience because it was all happy and wonderful. But you must understand that Silas was inexperienced. He bound my arms and my legs in a nice manner, but he was so overzealous in his task that he forgot to undress me before he bound my body to the chair. To help him get back into the right mood, I did a exotic dance for him. That seemed to put him in the correct mood as he leaped onto me. At first, he did not have any real technique, but as he started to relax into the intercourse, he was able to get better quality strokes. As the night went on, I was able to control my body through several climaxes before my body tired out. Good for you, Etta. Those breathing techniques will prove to enable you to endure. I said, breathing techniques?
Now here, I think it's realistic the day after people having sex. And here's the girl's description of it afterwards. And I think it's funny. I think it's realistic that she was like, it was all right. He was kind of new. He didn't really know what he was doing. So she wasn't expecting to be like the greatest sex she ever had in her life. It is what it is. That's pretty much what she describes. And as he got more comfortable and sort of more confident, he got better at it. But it's his first time. You weren't expecting him to be the greatest person of all time. And I think that would be normal. And then Etta was just kind of happy that the breathing techniques that Diana's been telling her have kind of been working for her. It's her first chance to use it in a real way. And Elizabeth is like breathing techniques. And so in the last book, the opening chapters, Diana was teaching Etta how to do these massage techniques, which help her to control her body. And so it's a month later, and so we in the series are catching up on that, and it's the first time for Etta to get to use those, and she seemed to have a really good time. And so here's Elizabeth picking up on it. And remember, Elizabeth in our story, she's 47 in the story, and she's the great grandmother of Bruce Wayne in our story. Her son is Patrick Wayne, and Patrick Wayne is the grandfather of Bruce Wayne. And so she's like, she's kind of interested in hearing what these techniques are. Like, what are these techniques?
Elizabeth asked. Yes, we Amazons have developed breathing techniques along with our meditation exercises to endure ourselves through many controlled orgasms. I replied. Is there an age limit to these techniques? Elizabeth asked. No. With proper conditioning and training, anyone can master the technique.
What they're talking about here, and one of the things that we need to identify as a writer, is you're dealing with a culture where people have superpowers. So, and whenever you're using a power, a talent, or a skill, you have to sort of identify that for the audience. And so here they're explaining something that's a skill. And in modern psychology, most things, everything that people learn in their life from the time that they're born or newborn is a skill. And it starts as what they call a scheme or schema, the idea of doing it, or their natural instinct of doing something. And then as they slowly learn to do stuff through experience, it becomes a skill. And so, and even if you acquire a skill or a technique, in that case, you have to use it a lot to get some practical experience. And then that's what prudence becomes. How do you actually apply it to something? And it's only through continuously use of something that you improve a skill. Simply just having a skill doesn't mean you're good at it. So, and our Hippolytus 3,500 and Diana's 2,800 years old, so they have a lot of practice at stuff that are skill based. And so Elizabeth, although she's 47 years old, she's pretty much young compared to him. Eda's only 23 in the story. So they're trying to teach them that through skill you can learn anything, and it doesn't matter how old you are, but you can always learn a skill. It's what they're implying here.
Hippolytus said, "Are these techniques difficult to learn?" Elizabeth asked. "No. Eda has been practicing them for almost a month now, and she has been able to sustain herself through 5 or more orgasms. I would be happy to teach you, Elizabeth, if you wanted to learn them." I said, "Thank you, Diana. I am not sure how to begin to ask for such a thing." Elizabeth said, "Well, initially, it begins with several massage techniques and learning to breathe correctly. Then as your body gets stronger physically and spiritually, we move to more sexual exercises." I said, "So Hippolyta, how was your evening with Patrick?" Eda asked. "It was fabulous. We started off in a good mood from the beginning. Patrick had a fantasy dream he wanted to play out, so we made use of some costumes in the playroom. We used..."
Now that dialogue there where Hippolytus says it was fabulous. I was trying out different ideas for the dialogue, and I was thinking, so everybody's sort of speaking in their own voice. Diana's the one writing the dialogue. Hippolytus speaking and Eda speaking her dialogue. But I wasn't sure if Hippolyta actually spoke that way, so I was just throwing it out there. And I kind of wanted to show that Hippolyta is, I don't want to say more feminine than Diana. Just, I kind of wanted to show that Hippolyta has a different way of expressing that feminism than Diana. Diana's a little more, I want to say stricter. She's more reserved than Hippolyta. I kind of wanted to show that in the dialogue, through the dialogue, that the characters were that way. And it's not that people have to pick it up. Oh, she's speaking sort of this way, and it's not the idea. I just wanted to have her dialogue as someone else's interpretation of her dialogue. Sort of as she's expressing it, be a little bit looser with the dialogue. It's kind of what it was going with that.
The names Warrior Maiden and Evil Patrick. He dressed as a Trojan warrior, although he never suspended me upside down, which was the original fantasy. He did bend me over a sawhorse and dominated me in a pleasant way. Your son has quite the stamina, Elizabeth. Hippolytus said.
I thought that was funny because they're talking with the mother and she's out there and she's like, well, he said he was going to hang me up upside down, and she's kind of disappointed that it never happened. But then she's like, she comes back with, well, he threw me over a sawhorse and he dominated me. that was really good. That was awesome. Like, yeah, that was awesome. And the mom's like, that's cool. I should have wrote in there where the mother was like feeling left out. But you couldn't really do it because it's Diana writing the story. So although she could read her mind and know it, she probably wouldn't write that in there. Out of politeness, I think she wouldn't write it. But give our ladies a chance to
The
talk.
rest of the jog went by swiftly as we made our way back to the manor. I returned to my room where Steve was getting ready. We showered together and then dressed for work. We made our way to the dining room to eat breakfast with the others. Using my telepathy, I had the Oracle computer on my ship make a film of the telepathic images I had conveyed to the others yesterday.
Now there's something important because in this time period, it didn't really have television. They had video, it was available at this time. Only the government really had it. And believe it or not, in World War II, they did have color film. It was available. And much of the Intel videos or imagery was shot in color detail. And only a small portion of the world got to view that, but it was super expensive back then, processing color film, and it had to be done with people that knew what they were doing. So or you lose to everything. So how do we get stuff from Diana's mind in her book in a way that they could do it in a briefing, military briefing? Because remember, in the Pentagon, they don't have the technology. They don't have computers. So we had to invent this technology to have the... I would think that the Amazons would have the technology that would be able to convert what they're doing into something readily available for that technology of that time period, which was film. You have film projectors. So, and slide projectors. So that's what she did.
Steve Trevor's Journal, Tuesday morning, December 14, 1943. I had awoke as Diana came into the room from her morning exercises. We showered together and dressed into our dress uniforms to return to Washington, D.C. this morning. As we were returning to the city by using Diana's ship, we had plenty of time to eat breakfast.
Now that's not an actual naval dress uniform, but it looks similar to it. It's in the right color and right shapes. But I had to find something close. I couldn't find any image with Adrian in naval uniform, and which would be their working blues and dress blues. But they're going in on a weekend, so they would probably wear her dress uniform. He would wear his army dress uniform on a weekend. During the war, if you're an enlisted guy and officer, they normally would travel in their uniforms, mainly because although during wartime you wouldn't be traveling with rank on your, just because it's a no-no. You don't do that because you get a shot and that kind of stuff. Because they don't want people knowing who's a commander and who's not, because there's spies everywhere. So during wartime, they don't normally do that. But at the same time, when they're out and about with the civilian population, the army, military wants this nice... They want the officers and enlisted men to present themselves in a way that's professional to the civilians, because they're the ones funding the military, and they want that funding to continue. And so here we get to see the ship again, the galleon, and connect back up with our main story.
Diana had relayed to me that she was going to have her ship's computer make a film of the imagery she observed from her telepathy and empathy. She thought that it would give Colonel Darnell a better understanding of what we were dealing with at Slaughter Swamp. I agreed with Diana and was amazed at the same time at just how useful the technology Diana had at her disposal. It was far more advanced than anything the War Department had at the time. It made me thankful for crash landing on her island, and it made me wonder how hard it had been for Diana to maintain her secret identity from me and the War Department all this time.
Now here's a chance that we got to hear Steve Trevor's sort of him dealing with Diana being, not only is she working as a spy, but technically she's foreign national in the play. And so we had to hear, at some point, hear what Steve's thinking is here, because before they started dating, he knew who she was when they came back from Themyscira, but they didn't start dating until recently. So now you're hearing him sort of deal with that in a practical way, because he's an intelligence officer. His duty is to report that kind of stuff to the War Department. And so he's kind of, what do I do? But this is our chance to introduce Argus into the story. And Diana's actually a member of Argus. Steve doesn't know that.
Time, well, at least, for the first year that I knew of Diana Prince, myself, I understood why Diana's mission to the mortal plane was important, and I equally understood it was important for Diana to be on the side of the United States during this war. Still, there was a part of me that was kind of torn with duty. As a military officer that had sworn an oath to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States, I wondered if I had a duty to notify my superiors of Wonder Woman, who was Diana Prince and was posing as a nurse and yeoman at the War Department. Technically, Diana was a foreign national. I had known that on some level that Diana must have known of my obligations to my duties as a major in the United States Army. However, as an intelligence officer, I did not want to lose an important asset to the war effort, but, on a deeper level, I was in love with Diana, and that love had a higher obligation before my duty to the state. Diana had conveyed to me that Colonel Darnell had a strong belief to suspect that Diana and Wonder Woman were
Now here,
the same person. They had attended a costume party last year when Diana dressed as Wonder Woman. He had deep feelings for Diana because she was his secretary, but he never acted on his feelings because he knew that Diana was in love with me. Since we have
So here we're dealing with the heart of everything. As I had known that on some level Diana must have known of my obligations to my duties as a major in the United States Army. However, as an intelligence officer, I did not want to lose an important asset to the war effort. But on a deeper level, I was in love with Diana. Here you're getting into sort of the concept of individual versus state. And though he's a civil servant, military officer, he still has an obligation to himself and family and stuff, which supersedes the state's needs. And that's an American quality. That's sort of what we're sort of discussing here. And this also gets in a sense of duty. This is going to go a bit kind of a tangent, but one of the ways people talk Diana into doing things is they sort of play on her sense of duty. She has a fairly strong sense of duty, even though she's a Libra. She feels obligated to do things. This kind of makes her an actress too. She'll follow the script because out of duty. And so you're going to see as the stories evolve in the future, even in the 1950 stories, one of the ways people really get her into doing things is to press upon her, well, it's a sense of duty. Athena does it all the time. Apollo to some extent. She's like, well, you know, it is duty. And Diana's like, dang it. Duty, of course, duty. And so here's Colonel Darnell. He's not really in love with Diana, but he loved her. And he can understand why Steve and her are in love. And he never really acted on that. He kind of treated her as a kind of a daughter type relation, but in reality, Diana worked for Darnell. And Lila Brown worked for Steve. And so Diana and Steve sort of end up working together a lot. And Diana's been pulling the double duty, working for both the major and the colonel. But her real boss is Colonel Darnell. So that's sort of where her loyalties are really to Darnell. But he secretly suspected that she was Wonder Woman, but he never acted on it. And we're going to meet Blankenship later. He kind of believes it too. But they don't know what to actually do because they don't want to wreck what's going on. She's been a valuable asset to them, and so they act hastily, they'll lose that. And they don't want that to happen.
Have been dating. Diana has always told me that we have to have faith in that things will work out for us. I have faith in that outcome. Still, I have often wondered what Diana saw in me that had driven her to love me. I am not an immortal and I do not have superpowers. I was just some fool that crashed a plane on an island of women. I do know that of all the lovers Diana has had through the last 2800 years, that if she told me that she loved me that it must be special. I write all this to convey my sense of respect and admiration for Diana and her help for the War Department, and to convey some sense of my own aspirations about Diana and our relationship for the reader of this narrative. I hope that one day when this war is over that Diana can live free of her identity to officially help the War Department. Her work with the U.S. Intelligence Service has been invaluable. Diana and I had gone down to the dining room after we changed our clothes. The others were there enjoying another wonderful breakfast that Manfred had prepared. In a strange way, our group had merged with the Wayne family into a close-knit group in just a few short days. It was like we had been family for a long time. Patrick and Silas had come down for breakfast in great spirits. The two seemed very...
Now here you're kind of seeing Steve make an observation that the group has slowly come together as a... so they're all really close, and part of that is Hippolyta and Alan were together. Etta has been with Silas, and Patrick has been with Hippolyta. And so there's sort of a bonding, definitely a bonding, but a spiritual bonding of the characters in a way that they're sort of, I don't want to say committed to each other, but they sort of, there's a comfort there. And it comes from their sexual intercourse. And I think when people sort of open themselves up that way, even in a casual way like that, there's a sort of respect for each other that comes about. And I don't mean that Silas and Patrick didn't respect the women before that, but I think after they've sort of been together that way, there's a sort of tension that's removed. And they're now intimate on some level. And so, and when they... What we're trying to convey in the story, though, is after people have sort of had this sort of I guess I'm going to use the word comfort, with comfort zone with each other, that they sort of just out of natural progression, I guess would be the right word. They get really comfortable with each other, and there's no real apprehension in the characters anymore. They're very open with each other, and I think it's coming through both in the dialogue and their relationship with the people.
Rejuvenated since I saw them last night. The two immediately melted with Hippolyta and Etta for breakfast, although Patrick and Silas seemed stiff in the joints this morning. Elizabeth too, she seemed to be in such a joint.
And right there you're seeing Patrick and Silas are a little stiff in the joint. The women are all healed up because the Amazons, they all can heal themselves, although Diana can heal other people. And one of the things that's happening with her and Steve is she's keeping Steve youthful because of her empathy. Whenever they have intercourse together, she rejuvenates his body. She heals him up, basically. And so when she's away from Steve in that 5-year period of time, even 10-year period of time, he ages rapidly, which is a result of them not being together anymore. And she's essentially prolonging his life when they're together, and whoever she's with in a sexual way will always have prolonged life and good health just because her healing abilities. And so that's both a good thing and a bad thing for her, because as word gets out more that she can heal people, she's going to be confounded by people always coming up to her looking to be healed. And this plays out later in Story of Diana, in Story of Joe West, where she's having to deal with that issue head on. Why does she get to choose to determine who lives and who dies, and how that comes to head will be that's her. She was given that gift. That's one of her powers, and she has the free will to decide. Fair or unfair, she has the free will to decide. But whenever she makes that decision, whoever she chooses to help, at the same time she denies somebody else. That will never change, and that's sort of where we're getting back to the idea of balance of nature. When you choose to help people in life, you also choose to deny other people help. And so when you focus help on one, you deny help on others. That will never change in life. And so at some level, helping people is a form of greed. And you as an individual have to decide who you're going to apply that help to. You can't help everybody. Even if you may want to, you can't. There's a limitation to that. And though technically she could help a lot of people. Who does she focus that help on? And under immortal law, they're supposed to help people one at a time. That's why it's focused in that way. It's not about being fair or unfair. It's about being prudent. What is the practical way of doing it, which is one person at a time. But it's something she struggles with mentally as a character to the play.
Joyful spirit, she spent most of the breakfast in dialogue with Diana. I just sat back and decided to take it all in from my position. After breakfast, Diana and I made our way to the foyer. We walked out to the car and used it to travel back to the ship. The other ship and car were left for Hippolyta and Etta. In a short time, we were in Washington, D.C. I drove us into the War Department building. We met with
There's a picture of the old War Department building that was prior to the Pentagon. Now, if you look across the river, there's Arlington. Off to the left is where the Pentagon actually was built. It's off just south of Arlington. Arlington is the home of Robert E. Lee, the famous home of Robert E. Lee, now the Arlington National Cemetery. But across from there was the old War Department building. It was built in 18 something. But you see the different buildings there. That's sort of why they built the Pentagon the way it is, even though it has 5 sides. Within each wedge is 5 different buildings. And so that's how the old War Department building. That building was demolished in 1970, but it remained unoccupied from like 1950 all the way till 20 years it spent unoccupied. And the little road there is Pennsylvania Avenue. The one that goes across the building is Constitution Avenue, and the White House is just right across the way from there. And this is giving you a little bit of history of what the War Department building was, where they worked. And this is where we're going to get to introduce the Argus part of the story and how it comes. Remember, the long-term story happening in the serial is first you have on the government side the formation of Argus, which Argus has been around since the Revolutionary War in our fiction. And then it's going to be modernized into Argus. And then the civilian side of that's going to be the Justice Society of America, which is also being constructed, which is indirectly being developed in the story at this point. It's just a natural outgrowth of the story. But here we get to see that.
Colonel Darnell in his office. He was there with another man. Good morning, Major Trevor, and Yeoman First Class Prince. This is General Blankenship. He is the director for the Advanced Research Group Uniting Superhumans. He has taken a keen interest in your work.
Okay, that's the first time Argus is mentioned in the serial. And there's General Blankenship. Now, he was a character that was developed for the television show that was in the 1970s. That character didn't really exist in the lore, but they made him for the show. But we decided to keep that character as a homage to the show from the 70s. I like the character. I like the actor. He was on the History Channel a lot. And I guess because he's part of the Douglas Kramer group. Douglas Kramer is a producer for a long time. He worked a lot with ABC. And he kept a lot of the same actors and a lot of shows he's done over the years. And prior to Wonder Woman, they did Mission Impossible. So in the first season of Wonder Woman, you see a lot of Mission Impossible actors in the show. And the show is sort of written like Mission Impossible. If you ever watch, I used to watch Mission Impossible. So it sort of had that same flow. But then in the second season, they were competing with the $6 Million Man and Bionic Woman. And they were competing with Charlie's Angels, which was on NBC. Wonder Woman at this time in its first season, I believe, was a CBS show. And then in its second season, it moved over to ABC. And $6 Million Man and Bionic Woman were ABC shows, I believe. That's how I remember it. And then so I wanted to keep that character. And so here we have, and he's introducing. Now, what you're seeing there, the Advanced Research Group Uniting Superhumans, was what it's going to become. And this is for the people that aren't familiar with DC comic lore, we're going to sort of explain that history and War Department history and the formation of the Office of Strategic Services. And also going forward, how we merge everything into what becomes the State Department, United Nations, and then Justice Society of America, and then what eventually becomes the CIA. And then also the War Department becomes the Department of Defense. All these things are happening at the same time in the United States. Logistical changes.
Work Major Trevor with Wonder Woman. I asked him to join our meeting this morning. Colonel Darnell said, "Good morning, General Blankenship." I said, "My pleasure, Major Trevor." General Blankenship said, "Good morning, General Blankenship." Diana said, "Good morning, Yeoman Prince. May I get everyone some coffee or water before the meeting starts?" Diana asked. "If you do not mind, Yeoman, I am sure that we all would appreciate coffee this morning." Darnell said. Diana went out of the meeting room to get the coffee and water. I went ahead to set up the film projector and to lay out our staff notes. After a short time, we were organized and ready to conduct the staff meeting. As I was the field officer in charge of the investigation, I started the briefing. Lights.
Now, I conducted this how my experience. I was in the Navy and I had to do a lot of these meetings, go to a lot of these type of meetings. You know, I was a technician. In the Navy, you do a lot of collateral duties, and one of the things I had to do was write training. I had to write a training procedure because our ship was forming up, so I had to write a training procedure on the different communication packages that the ship had to familiarize officers and enlisted men on what the ship's capabilities were at the time and what they started out with. Because when they build an aircraft carrier, they order all the equipment, but it takes like 10 years to build an aircraft carrier. So the stuff that they have from the initial procurement of equipment changes from the time that they actually start building a ship and outfit it. And what they do is they order all this stuff and they install it on the ship basically, and then when the ship goes out and does its trial runs, they come back in the yard and spend 2 years ripping all that stuff out, putting all new stuff in. And so while they're wiring up the ship basically. And so we had to put all these training documentation together, and it's basically what they're doing, these briefing that they're doing. And so I've attended a lot of these the way it would be in a military way. And one of the things that bothers me in a lot of superhero fiction is you have people writing these military briefings, and they sort of, when they portray the military or even law enforcement agencies for that matter, they're sort of in an unprofessional way. And most military offices, they conduct themselves in a professional way, and the people talk. And what you would do, and she's the technically secretary for this guy, she's going to be the one making the coffee, she's going to be the one prepping the room, make sure all the slides are ready, make sure all the training material, any type of written material they would need would be printed off. She would make the slides, that they would show, and that's why she made the film for the major, and he's the one that's going to give the presentation. So she would prepare the written parts of it, so that when you're given a briefing, you go ahead of time and you write out the whole program of what you would say, so you hand it to people in the briefing so they can follow along, so they don't have to write down notes and stuff, and then for the briefing. And that's sort of how the briefing would be. And then since it's a military meeting, what would happen is the major would give, because he's the officer, she's an enlisted man, he would give the briefing because he would be the one actually talking to the colonel. He would be the one actually talking to the general. And so when the general asks questions, he's going to ask questions to the major. And then if the enlisted person needs to speak, the major would then talk to the enlisted person. That's generally how military protocol works in a military meeting. You generally wouldn't have the enlisted person just out there speaking to the general like that. Even if they knew each other, it just wouldn't be that way. It just there'd be sort of a protocol they have to follow, and it'd be by rank. And that's sort of how everything is. And what they usually, a meeting occur like this would be is you want the general to be the one speaking, because his time is so precious and they don't want to waste his time. And they came in on their weekend, and this is after the big or before the big fight with Solomon Grundy, and he's come up with this information that he's found, and he's trying to, there's more stuff going on here, and he needs to know what to do, and he's got to get permission from the colonel, who's his boss, and the colonel is dealing with the general, who's his boss. And so this is really I wanted, when I wrote this dialogue out as a writer, I wanted it to be the way a military meeting would be, and not just a bunch of people getting together. I wanted to, whenever we have law enforcement or military people talking, government people for that matter, I wanted to follow the proper protocol in there. So even when we're dealing with legislators, mayors, sheriffs and stuff, there's a professional way they would do things. They wouldn't just be out there with rhetoric yelling at each other. There'd be a proper protocol that they would follow, and I try to adhere to that as a writer.
I said. Diana walked over to turn out the lights. What we are seeing is a film documentary produced by Wonder Woman of the individual we have given the name Solomon Grundy. He is responsible for destruction of 3 major railroad trains hauling freight from Gotham County to a place in Tennessee for the Clinton Engineering Works. Through our investigative work, Wonder Woman was able to learn through various intelligence sources that the Clinton Engineering Works is where the United States is conducting their atomic research. Using forensic analysis, we were able to learn that these attacks are centered around a local club in Gotham City named the Iceberg Club. The club is owned by a regional crime lord, Vincent Falcone. Why the attacks are being coordinated out of this club, we do not know at this time. We plan to conduct an intelligence operation at the club tonight using a local intelligence source, Alan Scott, and Elizabeth Wayne. As you can see from this footage, Solomon Grundy presents a clear and present threat to our national security. The 2 men watching the film looked in amazement and in shock at the level of destruction Solomon Grundy presented at this time. Do you suspect a Nazi connection with these attacks? Steve Blankenship asked. That is one of our working theories. The club is shielded by a powerful technology we do not yet understand. We suspect that the crime boss is shielding Nazi agents who are conducting attacks to our major industrial lines inside the US, I said.
Now that's important to say, because you're dealing with immortal technology, mortal technology. There's like magic, occult science going on there. How he would describe it in a military briefing is he would describe it as a technology. He would break it down into military points. What we know, what we don't know. We know they have this technology. It's something we don't really know about, but it's powerful and it's preventing us from learning more stuff. So that's what he's got to tell the general. And the general then has to make a decision on, the general is the one who decides the seriousness of this, because he has information, that the major and colonel do not. And what's going on is the American government is developing the atomic bomb. And not a lot of people know about it. The major doesn't even know about this stuff. And he only knows about it because his girlfriend told him. And because they discovered this information, and Major Trevor is telling this general about this, the general is hearing, oh my God. So this is supposed to be super secret. So now his level of seriousness goes way high. Well, if they found out about this, it's possible that the Nazis know about this. And so this is an extremely serious situation here. And so that's really what's going on in this scene here. And here's the general's response.
A truly amazing plot you have uncovered, Major Trevor. Here we have direct evidence that a superhuman being is being used by the Nazi as a covert operation to sabotage our service lines in the region. In reference to the atomic research, no one, outside of a few people here at the War Department.
Now there's the actual General Groves. General Groves, those of you not familiar with the development of the atomic bomb, he was the engineer for the government that developed he was responsible for the construction of the Pentagon in the middle of the war. And after doing that, they put him in charge of developing the atomic bomb. And he got the job because one of the things he was really great at was logistics. He was great at engineering. How do you get stuff from one point to another point? And so when they built the atomic bomb, they had a very limited budget. And so they had to build all these massive engineering plants, one in Tennessee, Arizona, New Mexico, Seattle, or out in Washington. And they had to build all these places in places that were out in the middle of nowhere. And so he was the guy that had to figure out how to do all that. How do we get all these things and how to do it in a way that's practical and cost effective. And he only had 2 years to do it. So he was the guy. And I always wanted, even though we're writing a science fiction story, I always like to have real historical points in the story, because I think it gives more credibility. As a writer, I think it gives the story more weight when people, especially people who are familiar with the history. And if your story connects up with all these things, even though it's a fictional story, I think people's ability to suspend disbelief is easier for them, because you're not. One of the problems I have with a lot of modern superhero stories is that I think the writers take too much liberty. This is the problem that I had with Brian Azzarello as a Wonder Woman writer. Not that he wasn't a good writer. He wrote some really good stuff. I like some, but I felt he took too many liberties. I think he just dismissed all the pagan stuff out of it and just made up his own stuff. And he just assumed that it was all made up. And then, and his writing shows that. You can clearly see in the writing he doesn't really know what he's talking about. It's just completely made up stuff. And I think it's because they get too far into, well, we can just make it up as we go along. And so when you pair their stuff with certain realities, the story doesn't make any sense. And so, two examples of that is you have immortals in the story, but they're all dying. And then you have mortals in the story, and they're living through stuff that should probably kill them, right? It doesn't make any sense. And none of the gods in the story are doing like what they're supposed to do and what they represent. They don't actually represent it. It's just like completely just doesn't make any sense in the story. And it's like in the game, a perfect example is if you play the game, what is it? Anyway, get the name of the game, but I don't want to go off on a tangent. What's that game? Anyway, in the game, they have it where you have all these gods and stuff in the game, and then they put Merlin in the game. He's not even a god, right? Doesn't make any sense. Anyone that studies lore and mythology, why would you have this guy and it's not even a god? And he's more powerful than the gods in the game. It doesn't make any sense. It's like when a lot of modern superhero, they have the Flash. Sure, he's the fastest man alive, but he's not going to be faster than Hermes, right? Hermes is a god. He's going to be way faster than that. And then, so in our lore, we don't do that. The humans are never going to be more powerful than the Titans in this lore. It's just the way it is. And you have different levels of Titans. You have the primordial Titans, you have the Olympic Titans, and so forth. And then you have the Titans and the Gorgons. And then they have different levels. And like within the angelical people, there are different levels of angels. But we still try to follow the general concept of hierarchy of angels. And what it would be, and the way it's taught. And so I don't think you should dismiss those things out here. Now, should you have to change a little thing to make the story work, that makes sense. But you shouldn't just dismiss things like the construction of the Pentagon, who the people were in the lore, and their sort of importance in history. Even if you liked or disliked the person, that's not our goal as a writer. Our goal as a writer is just to present the character, the person, and then let the reader decide how they want to interpret the actions of our people. So here's General Groves. There's the actual man, the historical guy, and his value to what we're doing.
Department knows anything about that. General Groves is heading the security for that project. It is vital to learn just how much knowledge the Nazi and their sources know about our research. Blankenship said. Then, we have your permission to proceed with this field operation tonight? I asked. Yes, by all means, Major Trevor. We must know the extent of where this matter exists and why. General Blankenship said. Lights on, I said. Diana walked over to turn on the lights. The rest of the meeting was spent discussing how our work center in the War Department was being merged with General Blankenship's department. As I have become the internal source to Wonder Woman, General Blankenship has become keenly interested in my field operations. Diana told me in confidence that the General suspected Diana and Wonder Woman were the same person. She probed his mind and learned that he has had field agents watching Diana and Etta for several months. Also, Diana...
Now here we were getting to play around with some of the transition effects. I've been slowly playing around with them just to give some excitement to the imagery there. But Diana can read his mind, and she's very aware that she's being watched by the War Department. She's very aware that there's this organization watching her. She knows who they're about. What they don't realize is she's still a part of Argus. And we as the audience don't know that she's part of Argus, but she's been part of Argus for over 100 years. And she was an agent for Argus and the Revolutionary War. And when we get down into the Amanda Waller Wallace era of Argus, Amanda Wallace, the way we're portraying her is she's a person who knows the history of Argus very well. She has to be, being the director, and she knows that Diana has been part of Argus for a long time, and one of the ways she gets Diana to do things is she plays on her loyalty. Because if anything Diana has been is loyal to Argus. And when Amanda Waller starts reorganizing Argus after Steve Trevor retires, she gets very motivated to recruit Athenata back into Argus. At the time that she goes to recruit Athenata, Diana hasn't been with Argus in about 40 years. But she sees her as someone important because she's been training all these heroes and metahumans for 40 years in the background. But Amanda Waller wants to bring her in so she can train people out in the open and be the face, which eventually becomes the Justice League of America. And she sees that as important. And this is the beginning of that here with General Blankenship.
Diana relayed to me that Blankenship had kept a file on Diana Prince and Wonder Woman to coordinate times and places. I was wondering if we had an opportunity to come clean here with the War Department. Diana suggested that we wait on that matter and focus on our immediate field operations. She felt that General Blankenship was an honest man and had good intentions, but he was not sure if he should interrupt the symbiotic relationship we had come to share. After the meeting, Diana and I made our way back to Wayne Manor via her invisible ship.
Etta Candy's.
Now to finish up that last point there, it's we got 20 minutes, but we're slowly hinting out that the command is aware that Diana and Wonder Woman are the same person. And they're aware that she worked with Steve, but what we're slowly hinting towards is everybody wants the same thing. They just don't know how to communicate that. But it's laying the plot for the next book. And so at every step of the way, especially when you're working with a serial as a writer, you have to know long term where the story is going to go. And how do we get there? And stuff that you develop in some stories are really there for other stories, and you have to know some of the stories from the past, how we got here to this story. And so that way when you get down to actually writing dialogue, I feel it's really easy to do. For me, I think at that point it's very easy to do because you know enough about how everybody got there, where they're all going, and so forth. So the dialogue becomes very easy to write. So here we're going to get into Etta Candy. To Etta, we're using her to explore Wayne Manor. And this is where she meets Miles Evans. Evan Miles.
Journal Tuesday afternoon, December 14th, 1943. The morning had come and gone without much to write about. Everyone had gone their separate ways to different parts of the manor. Myself, I had went for a walk around the manor. I had walked for some time and some distance. The manor was on a large estate. I ended up at the stables that were located on the property. They were not hard to locate as the smell from the stables carried a good distance in all directions. After talking with Manfred the other day, I had learned that the stables were the main function of the original estate. I guess that being an overland parcel company and worldwide shipping company required a good supply of horses. I do not know much about horses. I just know that they are pretty and big. I walked around the stable and tried not to interfere with anyone's workflow. Some of the horses took an interest in me. They came over and let me pet them. I am not sure if that is a good sign. It had made me wonder if that my kind spirit with people had been able to be picked up by the horses. Instinctively, I had thought of some questions as if I was a horse. Using the telepathy bracelet, I said hello to the horse. He responded not in English or not in a recognizable language but in a motion that...
Now here, Etta's playing around with her telepathy bracelet. She's trying to talk to the animals. She realized she can talk to the animals, but it's important to realize that the animal's not going to be talking in English. We don't know what English is. They're going to communicate how an animal communicates, and she's gonna use her interpret abilities to understand what that actually means. So that's it's important to be realistic about how another organism would talk to another organism that way. So that's what we're doing.
That I interpreted as hello. I laughed and smiled. He responded with what I call a purr like a cat. I am not sure what a horse refers to that behavior as. One of the stable hands had come over and had talked with me for a short while. That means that he likes you, the hand said. I turned to look and to smile at the hand. I was not sure how to respond. I could read his mind and tell that he was a kind man and had harbored no ill will towards me or towards the horses. Are you the caretaker here? I asked. Yes. I am Evan Miles. I am one of the stable.
Now here we meet Evan Miles, and this is setting up their relationship in the next book coming up, next two books. And it's a kind of a funny thing, and I thought it would be cool if Etta, she helps this guy out. Basically, he's an older guy. He's a widower, and he has a young daughter. His daughter is actually older than Etta. And these two end up having a sexual relationship together. And he's a 40-year-old guy like Elizabeth is, but it's sort of the opposite. In his relationship, the wife died. and he's kind of lost. He felt that he had his daughter, and he had basically his chance at the lottery, and he's living the best he can. And the reverse of that is Elizabeth. She feels that she kind of won the lottery with her husband. She had 2 children, and she's kind of feeling that that's it for her. There's nothing else for her to do other than raise her children. So Etta comes up with this idea to get these 2 people together. And she actually is successful at it, but they don't actually get together in terms of, they don't become like husband and wives, but they sort of become intimate. And this is Elizabeth's first relationship after her husband has died. And this is sort of compounded because her friend Catherine Kane has developed feelings for Elizabeth, and she's trying to woo Elizabeth into a relationship. And Elizabeth is kind of torn because she doesn't know what to do, and because she cares for both people. She cares for Catherine a little more because they've been friends longer, but she cares about this guy. But her reservation with this guy is that because she's the wealthy billionaire and he's the stable hand, she doesn't really know how to pursue this, and he ends up helping her sort of get past her reluctance, and in return he gets past his reluctance. And it's really through Etta Candy that he sort of learns to live again. And the idea of that scene was Samuel Elliott there. He was in a movie with Ann Archer where he was basically a beatnik surfer dude, and he was like in his 30s, I guess, going on 40s, and he was sort of growing out of that stage of his life. And he meets this young girl, 20-year-old girl, and it sort of renews his spirit in a way, and he learns to live again. And he moves on, but he learns to live again through this young girl. And so we wanted to recreate that scene, that idea. And so you have this chance for Etta, who's this young girl. She sort of discovers her gift in helping people, and this is sort of what she does. Sort of what she did with Diana or Athenata. She met this girl who, in this diner, she was feeling sort of not a friend in the world, is how she described it. And so she went up and started talking with her. And they became really good friends. And so these 2 people meet by happenstance, and they end up having this sexual relationship together. And what's funny is his daughter finds out. And when his daughter meets Etta Candy for the first time, his daughter's 25 and Etta's only 23. And he's like, Dad. And then what happens is the daughter ends up checking Etta out. And but the daughter and Etta actually become good friends. And the daughter is just more intrigued by what does these 2 have in common. And but the daughter is kind of, I don't want to say she doesn't fall in love with Etta, but she kind of becomes comfortable with Etta because Etta has this real gift with her where she just helps renew people, and she's just a really good person to be around. And so when she meets this guy, she's the person that brings him back basically to a point where he can sort of live again. Basically he's not dead, kind of still alive kind of way, and she just opens herself up to him in a way that helps renew his spirit. And I think that's really cool for the characters.
Stable hands here at the Wayne Stables. He said, "You must love your job, always being at this beautiful place and taking care of the horses." I said, "Yes ma'am, I do." He replied, "I am Etta Candy. I am here visiting Wayne Manor for the holidays. Pleased to meet you, Etta Candy." "Thank you, Evan." Evan was a tall man at a height of about 6 feet 4 inches. He was an older man. I guess that he was around 45 to 50. He was not showing gray hair yet. He was a man's man. He had a Maryland accent. It was not as prominent as my Texas accent, but it was a kind accent. I could read his mind and could see that he was honest and good-natured. I could see he found it hard not to look at me. Of course, I loved every minute of the attention. I must confess that I loved admiration directed towards me. The longer Evan and
Now, you may be asking, what does Sam Elliott have to do with Wonder Woman? Well, indirectly, he was one of the original people in the show Mission Impossible. And he was the Doc in Mission Impossible. And the producer for Mission Impossible was the producer for the Wonder Woman show in the 1970s. Though he wasn't in the show Wonder Woman, the connection is to their producer. And I thought he would be the perfect character for this character portrayal. And I always liked him as an actor. It's always been really good. And he has that accent that I wanted. And Etta, in this story, she has a Texas accent, although Bo is from California. It's a Californian accent. But in our story, she has a very prominent Texas accent. And he has that Maryland accent.
and I spoke, the more he liked me. I do not mean that in a sexual way or bloodlust way. He went into a whole explanation about horses and their habitat. Unfortunately, I have no idea what he really meant. I just knew that it was interesting.
Now here we're getting into Etta. She's a smart girl. She's going to be a lawyer. And he's a smart guy. He's a practical guy. He's been training horses his whole life. So he's got to know a lot about horses. I'm thinking of making him a veterinarian. And that's really his practical knowledge. He's a vet. That would make more sense. If you're hiring a stable guy running a stable like that, you'd probably want someone who has some serious knowledge on animal care. Beyond basic care, he had to have some insightful knowledge, which I'm thinking of making him a veterinarian. And so he's technically a doctor. And then, and so, I lost my train of thought. Here we're introducing him, and then we're basically going to introduce him, and then we get to know more about him in the next book. Is what we're doing. Same thing with Blankenship. We just need to introduce them, and this leads to the
Evan asked if I knew
party.
how to ride horses. I told him that I did not.
Oh yeah, I remember now. She's explaining all these things to her, and she's like, "Yeah, it sounds awesome," but she doesn't really know what he's talking about. She doesn't know anything about horses, and so she's like, "That's so awesome," and she just wants to get this guy to like him. And he's 40-year-old guy. He's picking up on this girl's all into him, but he's kind of like, she's only 23 years old. He doesn't know it. She's 23, but he knows that she's as young as his daughter. And he's kind of reluctant to be in this relationship because he has a daughter, and he doesn't know if he could be in a relationship with a 23-year-old girl. But he's also like, I still got it. And then what sort of spurs him into being in a relationship with Etta is his daughter is like against it initially. No, Dad, I forbid it. So, she hadn't forbid it. She's just being jokey about it. But when she meets Etta Candy for the first time, she's like, whoa, Dad. She's expecting like this 30-year-old, 40-year-old woman, and this hot 23-year-old girl comes out. He's like, whoa. It's kind of funny, I think.
He offered to give me riding lessons. He said that it was easy to learn, but he said that I would need to learn some basic safety lessons on the horse. I told him that I would return tomorrow to learn those lessons. He responded in kind. I decided to walk back to the main house to see if Diana and Steve had returned. 1 o'clock in the afternoon. When I walked into the manor, Steve and Diana had not returned back from Washington, D.C. I made my way to the parlor. Walter and Paris were making good use of the furniture to amuse themselves. I could see in my mind that Hippolyta was at the indoor pool relaxing. The manor had several pools. Hippolyta had found her way to one of the pools.
Here's a chance to show Hippolyta in her bikini. Now, remember, this is before the invention of the bikini, but the bikini wasn't really invented in the 1950s. The Greeks actually developed the concept of what bikini, but in their time, it was called the apadesmos and perizoma. And this, now in the Greek form, they didn't have the tie between, they had the top and then the bottom part. And then it's what the women would wear. And the one that Diana gives to Edda is the Amazon version of that. Now remember, the Amazons are millions of years. Their technology is millions of years ahead of where the current technology is at. So they're using materials that mortal humans don't even have, which are really strong materials, almost unbreakable material. It can't be damaged. And so Diana gives this bikini basically to Edda as a present, and Hippolyta is wearing the same one. So here we get to see the ladies.
I went to my room and changed into an appropriate swimsuit. Diana had given me a two-piece red swimsuit. The top she called an apadesmos, and the bottom she called the perizoma. And
this is the closest thing that I could find to that, which would be the top part, bottom part, the apadesmos, and that's what it closely resembles, is what the image there shows. But the one that Edda has doesn't have the straps for the bottom piece, perizoma. It just basically connects to her, and by sheer gripping, it stays on her without falling apart. And then that's how it works.
The apadesmos was similar to a bra, but it was made of an Amazon microfiber material that felt like silk. The perizoma was similar to panties. They were cut to resemble a thong. Diana called my bottom a C-string. It had no strings to hold the garment in place. Diana said it was made with a carbon nanofiber tubing that was as strong as steel, but light as a feather. Personally, the outfit showed off every part of my body. I can see why Amazons work out all the time. These outfits, they sure do make a girl want to work out. I made sure my outfit was in place and wrapped myself in a robe and made my way to the indoor pool. Hippolyta was laying out on one of the beach.
Now here's Edda. She's kind of being funny. She's like, "You sure do make a girl want to work out?" But she's wearing this thing and she's all uncomfortable because it feels like she doesn't have anything on. And she's a girl who's sure of herself, got a lot of confidence, but she doesn't have as much confidence as Diana and Hippolyta. Diana and Hippolyta are like out there. They're like, I'll put it out there. And Edda is not, she's still showing that she's still kind of young and inexperienced. And she's like, I hope this thing doesn't fall off. And
chairs. She wore an Amazon swimsuit similar to mine but was satin blue. Her anterior side facing the chair. Hippolyta's legs were muscular. Like Diana, she was finely cut. Her muscle tone was not intense as a man's muscular body, but her body was definitely hardened by years of exercise. She looked up as I walked by the chair to lay down. I had removed my robe and had set the garment down in one of the empty chairs. The cold air of the room and from the pool water passed over my body in a mild manner. I was a little uncomfortable wearing the bathing suit, and Hippolyta could see my discomfort. Relax, Edda, you have a wonderful body. When young Silas and young Patrick see you in that swimsuit, you will have to fight them off, she said. I hope so, Hippolyta. You Amazons certainly like your clothes to hug every part of your body. It feels like I have nothing on, but it feels like a man is hugging my body. At the same time, I said, the female body is our most powerful asset, Edda. Our body is what other people see, and it is part of our identity. Our garments and our clothes need to enhance our natural attributes. It is important to never be afraid of your own skin. The outfit shows confidence and strength. Besides, you should see the outfit that Diana has picked out for us to wear tonight for the iceberg lounge. They will melt some icebergs tonight, she said. Perhaps they will attract some penguins tonight. I joked, beware of the penguins, Edda. Hippolyta joked back. Hippolyta.
now they're talking about the iceberg lounge. That's where they're going to be going tonight. And I had a little homage to the penguin because, you know, Theodore Cobblepot is the father of Oswald Cobblepot, who becomes the penguin later on, but he's not even born yet. So Oswald Cobblepot. One of the things he's trying to restore his family's legacy, the Cobblepots. And Cobblepots used to be a very powerful name in Gotham City. They're one of the 3 major families, but people have forgotten about them. And the Waynes and the Canes still live on, but the Cobblepots have been kind of lost to history. And it only grows between 1950 and 1980. People forget all about them. And, his goal is to try to restore their name. So we're going to pause it there. It's 3 hours, 25 minutes. We pause it. So let's go ahead and set up for the intermission. Let's go ahead and make this smaller. Bigger. Here we go. Bring this back over. Our Nightbot playlist. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and break over for the intermission, and we'll be back. There'll be a 30-second changeover as OBS Studio starts and restarts, and then we'll be right back. Let me go ahead and change out the signs. There we go. All right, we'll be right back.